Welcome to the wonderful world of wine. We are your hosts, Mark Lenzi and Kim Simone, exploring all things wine with you. Our program is supported by Franklin Public Radio, and you can find us on our website, thewww.wine. Hello again, everybody. How are you, Kim?
I'm doing well, Mark. Yourself?
Everything is great, and today we
Wonderful.
have a very special guest. Danielle Frank is here. Danielle, how are you today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you for being here. And for all you out there, Danielle is the author of a book called A Wine Lover's Guide to Parenting. So before we talk about the book, Danielle, can you tell our listeners about your wine background and the story behind the book?
Sure. Over 25 years ago, I'm dating myself. I was working in the entertainment industry as a film publicist, and I decided to trade red carpets for red wine, I always say, and I transitioned into the wonderful world of wine and spirits. I am an avid wine lover, and I just had this job opportunity initially with Bacardi. I was there for 10 years, so they're just a spirits-only company. So I had a great 10-year foray into this world of wine and spirits working for them. And then 12 years ago, an opportunity arose to work at Moet Hennessy, which is the preeminent luxury wine and spirits producer of the best champagnes and fabulous wines. So I have been working with them for the last 12 years, representing some of the best champagnes and wines in our portfolio, as well as some spirits. About 12 years ago, I decided to mix my love of wine and humor and nurturing. I'm not a mom, but I am an auntie extraordinaire to my niece and nephew and so many of my friends' kids, and was watching my niece and nephew once, and as little kids do, they were whining a little bit. And I said, Auntie Danielle drinks wine. She doesn't listen to wine. And there the ideas all just came to me, thinking about all the things I know about wine and wine terminology, and thinking about all the fun parallels to how it relates to raising kids well.
That's very interesting that you came upon the idea of writing parenting. I guess it's parenting poetry. We're going to have you give a little reading in a little bit, but you're not a parent. So this is kind of from the aunt perspective, which is kind of a different take on parenting books.
Yeah, no, I say, my unique vantage point as a beloved auntie, it really allows me to witness the beautiful chaos of parenting while bringing a refreshed, judgment-free perspective. I say that sometimes, when you're a parent and you're in the trenches and on the battlefield, it's not so easy to see that the grape juice you're drinking can turn into a fine Cabernet, from the outside, and without having the stress of midnight feedings and carpool duty and all that. I'm able to have a fresh perspective and a more lenient view about it in a fun way, giving parents permission to laugh.
And the humor is something that definitely comes out in this book that you wrote. It's quite clever. It had a couple of little spots where I got a little guffaw out of what you had written.
Yeah, that was the intention.
So Kim and I, a few times on past shows, had mentioned a lot of things on the internet about the mommy culture and wine. A lot of bad things maybe on the internet about mommy wine brands and how moms need wine to parent a kid. What are your thoughts on that culture in the wine world? I mean, in looking from your point, not being a parent, is that why you said, hey, no one's ever done this kind of trending topic? Is that why you kind of had this idea as well?
I mean, I had the idea, a couple things. When I wrote this a long time ago, I first am bringing it to life now, but I wrote it a long time ago, and it was right around the time a book came out by Adam Mansbach called Go the F to Sleep. So if you've heard of that, that kind of, opened the foray for this new style, this new genre of an adult children's book. And I've just always loved rhyming, and I've always been good at it. So that's why that's where the initial spark came. I love the idea of rhyming and doing something fun and illustrated. And his book, like I said, opened the window for, this type of book. And then also working in the wine industry, we're all about storytelling. And I love making wine terminology, wine knowledge accessible, for the everyday person that doesn't work in the industry. I mean, how many times have you gone out to dinner with friends and they hand the wine list over to you? And I want to make wine knowledge fun and approachable. So that was the real goal with this is making it fun and approachable in a lighthearted way.
Well, it certainly I think hits that mark. There were a few times that I was reading through it, and it kind of reminded me of like some of the Oompa Loompas songs from Willy Wonka. This sort of tongue-in-cheek commentary on parenting, but then also relating it to wine terms. So it was a very clever way of combining the two.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of similarities, right? You don't want your kids to ferment like a fine wine. You need to let your kids breathe. All of the fun play on words that can help parents with survival.
And so the listeners can kind of understand the concept of the book. You do say right out in the book, it's a tongue-in-cheek book in the beginning. And I just want to say that when you started the book, one of the best quotes, I have to read it, that you said was in a rhyme. You said, "So pour yourself a glass and teach your kid some class to ensure your kid doesn't turn into an ass." And I said, now this book is going to be interesting. All right, Kim, as parents, we're like, okay,
Yep.
wine lovers and parents, you can relate to a lot of the rhymes. Did you get that sense of humor from the entertainment background, or just from watching your nieces and nephews?
Oh, I think, my sense of humor, I think it started at a young age. My dad was always quick-witted and tongue-in-cheek and funny. And so that's always been part of my DNA. And I love, even growing up, I just always love being the person to make everybody laugh. Not that, I'm the class clown or anything, but I just love being the funny one in the group, or trying to be. I just love putting a smile on everyone's face. So I love this, this kind of wit and, a little bit of over 21 adult language per se to make you laugh a little bit harder. But yeah, as someone who works in the wine world and hangs with a lot of parents, I've learned that managing wine, WINE, is an art, but managing wine, WHINE, is a survival skill.
Indeed. So we often speak to folks who have either written books for wine education or have podcasts or radio shows or whatnot. And we like to ask, there are so many varied ways that people learn about wine and have sort of gotten their knowledge and increased their passion for wine. Was your wine education just through your professional roles, or do you have some, wine certifications and things like that too?
Well, it started with drinking a lot of wine.
Drinking is usually a good place to start, right?
Yeah, it's always where it starts. Yes, and through my 12 years with Moet Hennessy, I did get certified. I am level 2 WSET. And just learning along the way, all the brand educations and through the certifications. But again, compared to other books, and as you say, I'm not a professional mother. I'm not a professional, somebody who studied parenting. So it is tongue in cheek, but so is this doesn't proclaim to be a book of knowledge for future sommeliers. This is for, the everyday person that just wants like a basic understanding of wine terminology, how wine is made, gives you a recipe for a mulled wine when it's related to the mold. Is your kid a mulled wine chapter? So it's really for the everyday person.
Talk more about the topics. With so many topics you can bring up in the wine world, how did you decide what to include in comparing to parenting? And were there things you wanted to put in but left out? Because I was thinking you should mention like fortified wine, because a lot of people need a lot of alcohol, higher alcohol to get through parenting, right?
Fortify yourself.
Yeah. So were there things like you said, this has to be in there, or how did you pick and choose?
Well, there's nothing I left out. Now you're giving me some ideas for book number 2. Although book number 2 for me is going to be a whiskey lover's guide to dog breeds. That's what I'm working on now.
Oh, that sounds clever.
Yes, it's going to be really fun. There's nothing I left out. I just, some of the chapters, I just started thinking about, as I said, a lot of the inspiration came from watching my niece and nephew. But again, I'm an auntie extraordinaire to so many of my friends' kids. I have a huge network of friends and their families that I call my families. So I've gotten to see these great parenting styles and skills. And, I also say, look, you don't need to be a parent to understand good human behavior in people and what you want to see, not only in kids, but adults. So I started thinking about those things. So yeah, some of the comparisons, like lesson 7, is your kid a mulled wine? As we know, a mulled wine is one that's served heated, it's spiced, and it's served generally as a punch. So I started thinking about what that's related to. And, it's related to bullying. Be aware of if your kid's a mulled wine. Is he packing a punch and being spiced and heated when he's not at home? It's important to nip that in the bud. The chapter I'd like to read, you don't want your kids to ferment, right? We know fermenting is the process of turning sugar into alcohol. Well, when you think of sugar, that's something sweet. Alcohol can be considered, harsh and biting. So you don't want your kids to turn into somebody harsh, biting, not have manners. So thinking about it in a fun way and ways, and I was thinking about the key wine words and how I was doing both sides, thinking of key wine words and how I could relate that to child rearing and behaviors. And then on the flip side, child behaviors, that what wine terminology would it go correlate to?
Yeah, so now would probably be a great time if you want to read that chapter so our listeners
I
can get a
would
taste
love
of this.
to. Okay, lesson 3. You don't want your kids to ferment. Manners, manners, manners are the key to it all. These lessons need to start even when they're small. Teach them this from day one before they start to crawl. You don't want your kid to be the sour grape in the bunch and turn into a spoiled brat that kids want to punch. When they start talking, make sure they know thank you and please, and to always say bless you when they hear someone sneeze. Please and thank you are an absolute must. Without that, your child's a total bust. There's nothing worse than a child who has behavior that is crude, because it'll continue as they're older and become someone who's rude. People don't take kindly to and aren't nice to those with attitude because it's very off-putting and puts others in a bad mood, oftentimes causing confrontation and leads to a nasty feud. Wanting to put a little bit of poison in your child's food. Is really how you want your kids to be viewed? Wouldn't you prefer that there's someone who's wooed? Without manners, they'll ferment and turn into someone harsh and biting. They may turn into a kid who's rude, obnoxious, and always fighting. So teach your kids some manners and to have some heart and soul. Without that, your kid may well turn into an a-hole.
This is the Willy Wonka Oompa Loompa thing I'm talking about.
Yep. You don't want your kid to turn into an Augustus Gloop or any of those bad, ill-mannered children.
Right.
It's great that people could hear before they read the book what the book is. It's all content like that. And it's great. And seriously, there's good wine tips as well worked into all that. So I think it was great the way you worked it all in.
Thank you. Yeah. And as I said, the mulled wine chapter gives a mulled wine recipe. And at the back of the book, it also gives a basic understanding of how wine is made.
You're listening to us today on The Wonderful World of Wine, and we are your hosts, Kim and Mark. We are here today with author Danielle Frank, and you can find information about her on her website, daniellefrankauthor.com. She also has social media links at Create a Great Story, and you can find our website at thewww.wine. We are here today with author Danielle Frank, who is talking to us about her book, which is called A Wine Lover's Guide to Parenting. It's sort of a tongue-in-cheek combination of wine education, wine tips, and also advice for the parent and how to not bring up bad children. So the question that I had for you, so we talked a little bit about how you kind of figured out what sort of wine tips to put into this book. How did you combine, or how did you end up matching up sort of the parenting lessons with the wine? Was it, you had mentioned that you had written this a while ago. Was this something that you sat down and did kind of all in one go, or was this developed over a significant amount of time?
As I said, that the initial chapter, I drink wine, I don't listen to wine, was inspired by my niece and nephew. I do have to do the disclaimer because if they listen to this, they'll be mad at me. But they were very good kids. But as I said, kids have the propensity to whine once in a while, but they were always very good kids. So I just started to, think about all the different terms. Of course, I was thinking about words that rhyme well, right? Venice, Bordeaux. I was thinking about things that I could rhyme well with words. And then I was thinking of just certain terminology like ferment and breathe and, mold and how it relates to, how it could be applicable to human behavior. Obviously, it leans and lends itself to a lot of creative license with some of the things of how I combine the two. But it's not, I don't have any rhymes in here with the word oenology or anything. That would be too hard to rhyme with. So really thinking about the words that rhyme well and that have great meaning related to human behavior.
I want to talk about a couple of the lessons, Danielle. So the chapter on aroma, you said when people nose your child, you want them to smell clean and fresh. And I thought this
Yeah.
was a perfect way to explain aroma of wine because as a wine buyer, when I'm testing out a wine, the first thing, if an aroma of a wine draws me in already, it's like, this is it, right? That part I thought was a great example of how people to learn wine and relate it. In the second lesson, I thought was really well explained. I mean, you did lessons on corked wine, you did lessons on grape types, styles, decanting. Do you feel like this comparison is a great way for people who don't really know wine to learn wine?
I mean, I think, we're talking about like nosing the wine to make sure it smells fine. That again was part of my process, right? I was thinking about the steps making wine, the different types of wines. And then I was thinking about all the different wine terminologies to enjoying the wine as well and how I could bring all these elements and relate it. So yeah, if this was a real professional, like clinical book on raising your kid well, would they have a chapter about, making sure your kid's clean and giving them a bath?
They might,
But
hygiene,
maybe.
basic
Yes,
hygiene.
yes, hygiene. But yeah, I mean, this allowed it to be fun about, making sure you want your kid to have a nice bouquet, much like a nice full-bodied Cabernet, not like a bottle of cheap Chardonnay. Yeah, it allowed to think about the nosing the wine to smelling a good smelling kid and raising them to smell well. Yeah, it just a lot of creative license there for sure.
You had another good one about toddler tantrums. Is that experience with the nephews and nieces throwing a tantrum? You said, well, now I can relate that.
Well, actually, no, I'm the lucky one. That is the beauty of being the aunt. I don't have to deal with the tantrums. I get to send them back to their parents. It's great. But I know kids have the propensity to throw tantrums. I travel a lot. I go out to eat. I'm on a lot of planes. I hear a lot of tantrums out there.
Even really good kids have tantrums every once in a while. So there's
Absolutely.
kind of no avoiding them when you have little ones like that.
Exactly. But yeah, I get to witness the fun. I get to be the lighthearted auntie, and then I get to I get to give them back before the 3 a.m. wake ups and the major meltdowns.
Now, I wanted to ask you a couple questions, Danielle, based on your industry background.
Yeah.
As a non-parent but great observer of children, what do you feel are your thoughts on alcohol and exposure for kids out in the world as far as what they see at home or what they see in retail? You think exposure in the alcohol industry is an issue with children?
No, I am of the mind. I've always been of the mindset, and I think this was part of my rearing too. It's like my parents, I remember like if they'd be out to dinner, I can have a sip of their after dinner drink of Bailey's or, I don't know. In France, right, the most parents give their kids wine at a young age. I think when you expose your kids in a responsible way, not just to wine, but to many things, it also desensitizes it in a negative way, right? Like, I mean, I always use the example, right? My parents, I didn't have a curfew growing up. They weren't very strict with me because they felt like they could trust me. My friends who had the strictest parents and that said no to everything and didn't expose them to things, they were the ones that rebelled the most. I had nothing to rebel against. I was probably the last one to start really, drinking or staying out past curfew or doing all the things that teenagers do. I think when you're exposed to things, and parents start talking to them about it in such a way that it's about enjoyment and not about getting drunk, then kids start to develop a keener sense of what the world of wine is all about. It is about enjoyment. It's not just about chugging it to get drunk.
I've heard a good sort of crossover thing or something that relates to that as well is you were just talking about when really strict parents kind of make their kids not have exposure to a lot of things. I feel like a lot of that is applicable for food as well. So like kids that are never allowed to have sweets or candy or desserts or whatever, then they really gravitate towards that stuff. But if you allow a balanced, exposure to all sorts of things, including, yeah, you can have a little dessert or, sure, you can have one soda with this week or whatever, then it's not an issue. So the regulatory part of it is more internal for the kids, and so they just get a better balance of how to, how to experience those things. And I like the idea of it being about the pleasure of it and not about, the risk taking, because that is such a big part of especially parenting teenagers, is how do you mitigate the risk that they're facing but still make sure that their developing brains and bodies get, the appropriate signals that they're doing something that's a little scary and maybe a little risky, and then they develop better that way. I guess that was sort of long-winded of me, but
No, 100%. I mean, if you make anything taboo, right? Sugar, wine, anything like that, then, kids have a higher propensity to like, I really want that. And I, want to potentially abuse it, right? Not abuse it in that way, but like drink till they get drunk or eat, way too much sugar. But when is something that's like they're just exposed to and it just becomes part of a norm and learn about enjoyment, then I think, it serves the purpose of what it's meant to be.
I think a lot of times people think I'm crazy when I tell my story like that, because when I was very young, my parents bought a liquor store. So I had to go there because they worked there. And I think at that age, you learned to respect it. You learned to see, you could see when it was bad and when it was good. And I think people think that exposure can be bad to a child, but in a way, it's good that they're exposed young. And I'm sure Kim can relate to this, and maybe you as well, Danielle, but I remember my dad putting his finger in wine and putting on my kids when they were babies on their lips. And I'm like, oh my God, what the hell's he doing?
we actually never did that.
Yeah.
Believe it or not.
Yeah.
But we do let our kids have tastes of things. And, it's funny. Mine, especially my older one, really has no interest at all. So we'll see if that holds up when he goes to college.
Yeah. The next thing I wanted to ask you was, Kim is our bubbly queen here on the show. She's a certified champagne specialist. And I wanted to ask you, since you work for some of the biggest brands in champagne, we talk about this a lot on the show, is what's going on, in your opinion, with champagne in the world? What's happening?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky time right now, and it's not just champagne. The younger generations are drinking less. They're engaged more with CBD and non-al. So we see a shift for sure, but I don't know. I mean, I think when you have such historical brands, brands that have stood the test of time since, the 1700s, I'm not too concerned will weather the storm when you have tried and true brands that truly, I don't think I'm biased just because I work for some of the best champagne houses. I truly think the brands I get to represent are some of the best out there. And I think that can stand the test of time. And, as younger generations start to learn to enjoy and try it, and, our brands are very good at marketing too. So we're always looking at how we speak to that younger consumer in a fun, approachable way, so that hopefully they start to develop that palate to enjoy some of these beautiful champagnes that exist out there.
Well, they're saying the people want to spend the money to celebrate, but it's so funny. You see trends that say champagne is less, selling less, and then you see it's selling great, and then Prosecco's hurting it. So we never know the true story with it.
Yeah, it's really hard to look at all of the conflicting information, not only for, say, sales and who's drinking, who's not drinking, but health of wine, all of that stuff. We get bombarded with all of these conflicting kind of news snippets, or, this research study or whatnot. So it does feel like it's kind of a confusing time right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's a couple things. I mean, as I said, the biggest thing that we're concerned about is, people drinking non-al or heavily CBD. But when it comes to champagne, we don't see people trading down as much now to Prosecco, because, as you said, there's this new sort of social identification going on with consumers right now, and consumers are building their brand with our brand, and we are still seeing premiumization. So affluent guests continue to buy and celebrate and self-reward. Less affluent customers, they still have requirements for treating and rewarding. And the Gen Z LDA consumers, they're hyper engaged in experiential occasions. So when they go out, they might be buying less, but they want to buy better. So that's why, everything that we're doing, our marketing, I mean, I think one of our brands, Viticulture, is one of the best in marketing. If you've, my whole Instagram has been flooded with pictures of influencers posting of, Morton's did a special with the Viticulture burger boxes and a glass of champagne, or the Viticulture fry boxes. So it's that like
Yeah.
identifiable, that yellow, Clico yellow Pantone that we own. And this exploded. This program with Morton's, my colleague works with Morton's, and I saw the numbers. It is astounding what this did, because, influencers, consumers, they couldn't wait to go to Morton's to post about, post pictures of them enjoying this, beautiful, colorful experience. Because again, they're building their own social brand and their social identification with our brands, going into these places, drinking certain brands. That's how they build their brand. So I think that's what we have going for us as well.
And you sort of hit the nail on the head with the champagne and French fry thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Champagne and French fries, champagne and fried chicken.
Oh,
Fantastic
potato
combination.
chips. I could go on and
Absolutely. Champagne with everything.
on. Yeah, don't get me started, because I'll just
Yeah.
go off on food and wine pairings with champagne.
So Danielle, we found you because there was a great review of the book online. Any interesting feedback you've gotten from the book being out that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, luckily, luckily the feedback has been great. Parents have said it truly does resonate with them. And yeah, I've gotten, let me see, I have some great testimonials from people as well.
No parenting groups yelling at you for
No parenting groups yelling at me. I was worried about that again with people saying you're not a parent, but as I explain, everything that I've shared with you today is, you don't need to be a parent to have fun with this and to see human behavior. And yeah, it's gotten great reviews. A master sommelier said, I got Jennifer Weather said, as a master sommelier, wine lover, and a mom of two, I can relate on every level to this book. So that was very rewarding to read that. Brad Thor, who's #1 New York Times bestselling author. He's also a parent. He said, smart, funny, exactly what every parent needs. I've gotten reviews on Amazon from people who said, as an auntie, they love this book. Everybody's loving gifting it for every baby shower that they're going to. But even as an aunt, or I've heard some grandparents say they've really enjoyed it. Anybody that just is involved with kids in any capacity, whether you're a parent or not, or somebody who's just simply a wine lover, everybody seems to gravitating towards it so far, which is great. Really appreciative of that.
And you mentioned the idea of a future book coming out. Any further detail on that you'd like to give? Whiskey related, you said?
Yeah, it's going to be a whiskey lover's guide to dog breeds. So it's going to be a different style. It's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be rhyming like this. It's just going to be sharing about, different dog breeds and different whiskeys, and, what a dog breed, what would be their whiskey comparison, let's say.
And
So kind
are
of
you
like
a dog owner?
Well, so like a maker's mark could be similar to like a golden retriever. Both is warm, approachable, universally loved. Maker's Mark is smooth, easy drinking, just like the reliable family friend golden retriever. So relating like the notes and the style of the whiskey to the style of the dog.
I like that. It's kind of like what we did for our Christmas show this year, Mark.
Yeah, Charlie Brown
nice.
wine. Yeah.
We did
Yeah.
Charlie Brown characters, and if they were a wine, what wine would they be?
Oh, I love that. I'm going to have to listen to that one. Yeah, another
do
example,
it.
like wild turkey would be, I see that as a beagle, right? Spirited, slightly mischievous, full of character. Beagles, as we know, have big personalities and small bodies. So like wild turkey is bold, punchy spice, and it's an accessible price point. So yeah, having some fun with that.
Yeah.
Pappy Van Winkle might be an Irish wolfhound. Rare, majestic, highly coveted.
What you did with your book is what the wine world needs. We need people to draw attention to wine in different way, and it definitely did that. Is there anything more in your book you want to share with the listeners you'd like to read that?
I would love to. How about I read the Is Your Kid a Mulled Wine one? Because even though it takes on a serious it has serious meaning, it really is, and I don't mean to go so serious right now, but The bullying you hear about today, it's really upsetting. Maybe you hear about it more and more because social media is so prevalent. But when we were younger, you didn't hear about kids 12, 13 years old taking their lives because they were being bullied. So this chapter really hits home, just was really an important chapter for me to include. So as I said before, is your kid a mulled wine? Mulled wine's heated, packed as a punch. So that's what this chapter is about. An extremely important fact of life that you must understand is bullying amongst kids has gotten completely out of hand. Bullying is a major problem amongst the youth today. Effects on the recipient sometimes never go away. The impact on a child can completely affect their life, making them insecure and depressed, causing them constant strife. You need to know if your kid's packing a punch to others at school. Are they making fun of the other kids and acting very cruel? To the other kids, are they acting real tough, pushing and shoving and being rough? Are they considered a bully and perceived as mean? If so, you make sure that you're aware of the scene, and it's imperative that you get in between. Stop this before it persists as they become a teen. You make sure your child knows that you will not tolerate any kind of conduct that is mean, rude, and displays hate. We all want to imagine our kids as the perfect little star, but it's your job as a parent to know who your kids really are. Are they sweet as pie when they're with you, then trouble when they're far? This is very important, so heed my advice. So pay attention and teach them to be nice, not a mulled wine that is heated with some spice. Ensure your child is soft, even-bodied like a Merlot, not rough and tough that others want to deal them a nasty blow.
Nice and relatable, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the mulled
Yeah.
wine thing was a good comparison there.
I actually really liked that one specifically because when we talk about bullies, we tend to focus on the kid being bullied, and parents have, ways to address that. But it's a lot less that we take the focus of, well, if your kid is the bully, how do you deal with that? So I like that you kind of put that at the forefront.
Yeah, and I've spoken to a lot of parents too, and I spoke to one woman, and we were having a really honest conversation about it, and she had heard her son was bullying another kid at school, and obviously it was very upsetting because she admitted it's like you never want to think about your kid being the one, and
Right.
It's hard. You're always, she said it's like you just want to be like, nope, not true, that's not my kid, but she really embraced it and was like, okay, if this is what my kid is about when he's outside the house and I'm not aware of it, then I'm glad to know. So I can work with him to make sure that we nip it in the bud, and I'm giving him the best opportunity to be the best person that he can be.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well,
Love it.
Danielle, thank you so much. And for our listeners, they can buy the book at your website and Amazon, correct?
There's not a link through the website. You can buy it online at Amazon or barnesandnoble.com. But my website is lots of fun to look at, and videos and pictures and all that great stuff. But the book is online at Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And thank you both for having me on this fabulous show. It's so great to be a part of it, and look forward to hearing more of your episodes coming out.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today on The Wonderful World of Wine. We have been your hosts, Mark Lenzi and Kim Simone, exploring all things wine with you. Well, our program is supported by Franklin Public Radio, located in Franklin, Massachusetts. Our website is thewww.wine. Today, our special guest has been Danielle Frank. To find Danielle, you can go on her website, daniellefrankauthor.com. You can find her on Instagram at Create a Great Story. For our past episodes, you can find us on all social media, The Wonderful World of Wine. Cheers.
Cheers.
Wine, wine, wine.